Hi everybody, today I'm going to be talking to you about 5 unsolved murder cases that still have everybody baffled, from the boy in the box to the mystery of room 1046. Today, 1/3 of all American murders go unsolved, and it's cases like these that haunt us with the thought that the killer was never caught and could still be walking among us. Throughout American history, in fact, there's been no shortage of unsolved murder cases that are as creepy as they are baffling. Number 1 is the boy in the box. On February the 23rd, 1957, a man was checking his muskrat traps in the woods off Susquehanna Road in Fox Chase, Philadelphia, when he came upon a baby bassinet box with a dead body in it. Knowing that his muskrat traps were illegal, the man decided against reporting the body. 2 days later, a college student named Frederick Benesis was spying on girls at the Good Shepherd School when he too came upon the body. Benesis was also reluctant to notify the police, but a day later he nonetheless reached out to the authorities. The body was that of a young child who has since become known as the boy in the box, as well as America's unknown child. The boy was completely naked and his hands and feet were wrinkled as if he had been submerged into water before he died. Furthermore, his esophagus contained a dark substance, suggesting that he might have vomited shortly before he died, the case of which appeared to be several blows to the head. Surprisingly, even though this case attracted significant media attention, no one ever came forward to identify the boy. However, progress was made in 2002 when a psychiatrist contacted the authorities with information regarding the case. The psychiatrist claimed that a patient of hers, a woman named Mary, confided that her parents had bought America's unknown child and used him as a sex toy. According to Mary, her mother had been bathing the boy when he suddenly threw up. Angered, Mary's mother beat him to death. Mary claimed that she accompanied her mother to northeast Philadelphia woods, where they wrapped the boy in a blanket, placed him in a box, and left him there. The investigators were convinced that Mary was telling the truth, even if she was mentally unstable. However, when Mary's name leaked to the press, she left the country, and no further efforts have been made to investigate the curious case of America's unknown child. Number 2, the Black Dahlia. On January the 15th, 1947, the dismembered body of a woman was discovered in a vacant lot in Lamont Park, Los Angeles. So surreal was the scene that the woman who discovered the body, Betty Bersinger, initially thought that she had come upon a severed mannequin. The body was completely drained of blood and had seemingly been washed, and the face had been slashed from mouth to ear. The upper and lower parts of the body were placed a foot away from each other and were posed. The hands were placed over the head, the elbows bent, and the legs spread. The intestines were tucked under the buttocks. After the authorities were called, the body was identified as Elizabeth Short, later known as the Black Dahlia, a 22-year-old aspiring actress who had been dating a married salesman. 6 days after the gruesome discovery, on January the 21st, the editor of the Los Angeles Examiner, James Richardson, received an anonymous call. The caller told Richardson to expect souvenirs. On January the 24th, a curious envelope was discovered by a US Postal Service worker. The envelope was addressed to the Los Angeles Examiner and other Los Angeles papers. The letter contained Short's birth certificate, photos, and other personal belongings. On January the 26th, another letter came. It said, "Here it is, turning in Wednesday, January the 29th, 10 a.m, had my fun at police, Black Dahlia Avenger." The note included the location where the killer would supposedly show up. The police waited patiently, but to their dismay, the killer never showed. That same day, another note was sent. "Have changed my mind. You would not give me a square deal. Dahlia killing was justified." Over the years, the police have questioned countless suspects and self-confessed Black Dahlia killers. However, to this day, the Black Dahlia's murderer has not been found and remains one of the most baffling, unsolved murder cases in history. Number 3, the Icebox Murders. On June the 23rd, 1965, Houston patrolmen paid a standard visit to the house of an elderly couple, Fred and Edwina Rogers. To their surprise, they found the house empty and were probably on their way out when one of them decided to check the fridge. Charles Bullock, one of the patrolmen present that day, recalled the scene. He said, "I opened up a refrigerator and seen nothing but meat stacked in it. My partner standing next to me made the comment that it looked like somebody had butchered a hog. We didn't know it was a body until we got ready to close the refrigerator and we could see the head down in the bottom of the vegetable bin. Police investigated and discovered that Fred, 81, and Edwina, 72, had actually been killed a week before they were placed in the refrigerator. Edwina had been brutally beaten and then shot, while Fred had had his head crushed. His insides were later flushed down the toilet. The killer was never found, but the prime suspect was and still is the elderly couple's son Charles, who was 43 years old at the time. No one could ever find him. He disappeared without a trace. However, recently, two Houstonians, Hugh and Martha Gardner, have declared that they have cracked the icebox murder case wide open. According to the Gardners, Charles, who was a geophysicist, was physically and emotionally abused by his parents from a young age. His parents lived in the house that was owned by Charles and constantly took out loans in his name. Tired of being constantly abused, Charles supposedly killed them. He then fled to Mexico, it is believed, and soon made his way down to South America, where he continued working as a geophysicist. Number 4. The Mystery of Room 1046. On January the 2nd, 1935, a man checked into room 1046 at the Hotel President in Kansas City. His name, according to the hotel register, was Ronald T. Owen, and his home address was in Los Angeles. He had a cauliflower ear, brown hair, and a horizontal scar on his scalp. He had no luggage except for a hairbrush, a comb, and toothpaste. That same day that Owen checked in at the hotel, a maid stopped by room 1046. According to her, Owen seemed frightened. The blinds were shut tight, and the room's only source of light came from a small lamp. After the maid was done cleaning the room, Owen asked her to leave the door unlocked because he was expecting a friend. Later, when the maid returned with fresh towels, she saw a note on the dresser that said, "Don, I will be back in 15 minutes. Wait." The next morning, the maid returned to room 1046. It was locked from the outside, so she assumed that Owen had gone out. However, to her surprise, Owen was in the room, meaning that someone else had stopped by previously and locked Owen in. Just like the previous night, Owen was sitting in the dark. Then a phone rang. Owen answered and said, "No, Don, I don't want to eat. I am not hungry. I just had breakfast." That same day, a motorist named Robert Lane picked up a man near the Hotel President. The man apparently told Lane that he was going to kill someone tomorrow. Later on, Lane identified the stranger he had picked up as Owen. That night, when the maid returned to room 1046 with fresh towels, she was turned away by a gruff-sounding man. The next morning, the hotel staff noticed that the telephone in room 1046 was off the hook. A bellboy was sent up to the room, where he discovered Owen lying in a puddle of blood. It was obvious that Owen had been tortured. When the police asked Owen who did this to him, he answered, "Nobody." His wounds, according to him, were the result of him falling against the bathtub. Mysteriously, his clothes were missing. When the police tried to confirm Owen's identity, they found that Ronald T. Owen did not exist. Owen, who had by now become John Doe, died in the hospital and was to be buried in the Potter's Field. However, an anonymous call came asking for the burial to be postponed until funds for a proper funeral were wired. 13 flowers were sent for the funeral and was signed "Love Forever, Louise." In 1936, a woman read about the case and thought that Owen looked a lot like her friend's missing son, Artemis Ogletree. Ogletree's mother confirmed that the man from room 1064 was indeed her son, but the case wasn't able to progress any further. Police never found the mysterious Don, and they could never trace the mysterious woman named Louise who funded the funeral and sent the flowers. Number 5. Hall Mills Murder. On September the 16th, 1922, two teenage lovers were out on a stroll when they discovered the bodies of a man and a woman lying under a crabapple tree. Both the man and the woman were dead. The man was shot once, the woman 3 times. The bodies had been posed. Both the man's and the woman's feet were pointing towards the apple tree. The man's hand was on the woman's neck and hers on his knee. The man's card was propped up against his foot. A hat concealed the man's head, and a scarf was wrapped around the woman's neck. It was later discovered that the woman's tongue had been cut out. Torn love letters were scattered all around them. The bodies were those of Reverend Edward Wheeler Hall and Eleanor Reinhardt Mills. The two had been lovers, but their affair was a complicated one. Mills was married to the church's janitor, and Hall was married to a wealthy woman named Frances Stevens Hall, the main murder suspect. The crime scene was contaminated by souvenir hunters, and thus the police had nothing solid to go on until Jane Gibson, better known as the Pig Woman, came forward. She was a hog farmer who lived near this crime scene. According to her, on the night of September the 14th, she saw 4 people, 2 men and 2 women, in her cornfield. Gibson heard a woman yell, "Explain these letters," gunshots, and then a woman shrieking, "Henry." The case was dismissed and no one was charged, but then 4 years later, a maid that had previously served the Halls confessed that the Reverend wanted to annul his marriage and elope with Mills. The Pig Woman was once again called in to testify, but her testimony was deemed inaccurate. It didn't help that Gibson's mother, who sat in the front row, kept mumbling "liar, liar" throughout the testimony, thus further ruining Gibson's credibility. Mrs. Hall and her brothers Henry and William were acquitted. Thank you for listening to my 5 unsolved and baffling murders. I shall try and find some more for you and do another video for you. Please like and subscribe, and I will be with you soon. Thanks ever so much for listening. Thank you.